Currently, anime has a market cap of $30 billion, making it one of the most profitable mediums in the world. That is a lot of money to fund some truly orgasmic animations. And because of the visually euphoric anime that exists today, it's hard to truly comprehend how humble anime's beginnings was. The roots of Japanese animation actually started in the 18th century, when Japan obtained an early projection device called the Magic Lantern. They got it through trade with the Dutch. Through using lights and mirrors, it was capable of casting images painted on the glass slides. It often found use in education and entertainment. Though it was a rudimentary start to the medium, it can be argued this is the true birth of anime. The history between this device and the first Japanese animated film is very shaky, as there is no definitive records, so many consider it lost to time. But manga author Natsusumi Matsumoto stated it was discovered in Kyoto in 2005, and whether he's right or not, it's Japanese oldest animated film, being produced around 1907. It was called Katsudo Sashin, or activity photo in English. Nothing fancy, just a boy in a sailor suit writing the kanji characters for the name of the anime. But a few Western countries had a head start on the art form. This led to Japanese cinema screening Western cartoons to meet demand. The first ever confirmed form animation screening in Japan happened on May 15, 1912. It was a French film called Emile Collesse les Exploits de la Foulette. Then, in the year 1914, early European and American cartoons were introduced into Japan. Their popularity would kickstart the age of anime, as Japanese animators strived to carve out their own lane in the field. This would be thanks to visionaries Junichi Kochi, Shitatara Kitayama, and Oten Shimokawa. Junjunchi was the first one to bring his ideas to life. He would release The Dull Sword in 1917. It was a 4-minute long silent short. It basically just told the story about a foolish ronin who purchased a dull sword and his subsequent attempts at senjukuri. The short had a simple concept, but it was a big step forward. In the following year, Sentaro and Oten would produce similar shorts with their own touch. Though they was very passionate, it was very difficult for Japanese animators to keep up with their Western competitors, because from the 1920s up until the Second World War, they had to compete with Disney, and they were dominating the Japanese market. Disney had a much higher budget because of some huge financial backers, so Japanese animators had to work a lot cheaper for a lot more hours. Some theorize that this had a decade-long impact on the current state of the industry, as many in the manga and anime industry are still underpaid and overworked, which we learned from our previous videos. To cut costs, they often use something called cutout animation instead of celluloid animation because it was a lot cheaper. Cell animation is the traditional animation you think of, while cutout animation is more like stop motion, using things like stiff fabrics, photographs, and flat characters. In 1933, Kenzo Mosaka created an anime called Chikara to Onna, and it was the very first anime created entirely using cell animation. Then, during the Second World War, many countries enforced cultural nationalism. They forced strict censorship on all forms of media. Many Japanese animators were coerced into producing animations that was in line with Japanese nationalism. This was often done against the animator's will, but it did have a positive impact on the medium. For the very first time, studios gained additional funding from the government. Even the education ministry began commissioning anime for both political and educational reasons. Anime was being used to promote anything from good hygiene to anti-tobacco campaigns. With this influx of money into the industry, professional animation began to develop very quickly. We even got the very first adult-only anime, The Cool Ship. Showing anime's impact and target audience was continuing to widen. A few years later in the West, color animation was beginning to become more commonplace. And of course, this impressed the Japanese audience. Japan at the time was still using tinted film strips to give the illusion of color, but not wanting to be outdone, Japan would release Princess Katara in full color as well, and also a behind-the-scenes documentary on how the film was made. This was almost like a flex to the West on their unique ability to adapt and exceed all expectations the world had for the underdogs of animation. During this time period, even the live-action studios like Tojoki shifted their attention to animation. Remember Kenzo, who produced that anime Cell Animation? Well, he joined this studio, and they created Kumo to Tulip. It's a short anime about a ladybug being chased by a spider. It was released in 1943, and over 50 years later in 2001, a Japanese magazine called AMAIZING elected it as one of the greatest anime productions of all time, showing how innovative the creators in this time period was. Towards the end of the war period, the Japanese army commissioned films that show the people of Japan winning. One famous film they commissioned was called Masuyo Seio's Mamatoro. Though controversial, the animation was noticeably getting more and more advanced. So when the war was over, the real growth begins to happen. Largely thanks to one man, Osamu Tezuka, the godfather of anime. He was a manga artist, cartoonist, and animator who many consider the Japanese Walt Disney. He would create several iconic series in his lifetime. Two of his most famous series are Astro Boy and Kimba the White Lion. Saying his influence was generational was an understatement. He was introduced to early Disney cartoons through his mom. Though they did inspire him, he strived very hard to create unique stories. This brings us to 1948, when a man named Hiroshi Hiroshi Takahata bought and renamed the studio Toei Doga. His intention was to create the de facto animation studio of Japan, or quote, the Disney of the East. I would say he succeeded, as the familiar sounding name isn't a coincidence. Toei Doga went on to be known as Toei Animation. Yes, the same studio that animated Dragon Ball, One Piece, Sailor Moon, Slam Dunk, and hundreds more anime over the decades. They animated some of the most successful shows and movies in history. Takahata connected many exceptional animators together, and they produced many great works. But the defining moment for Japanese anime and Toei was when they released The Tale of the White Serpent in October 1958. It was an instant hit, and just a few years later, it would also be released in the United States in 1961 under the name The Panda and the Magic Serpent. It would be a major success, making it an international blockbuster, putting anime on the map worldwide. Now remember Tezuka? At this point, he had been drawing manga for years, but unlike today, during this time period, manga and anime had largely been considered different mediums. Some artists create manga and others create anime, but Tezuka would change all of that when he started adapting manga works into animation. He started with his own manga, a la Kazam the Great, a Japanese retelling of the Journey to the West. He thought it was very fun and decided to dedicate his life to anime, so much so that he established an anime studio called Mushi Productions in 1960. This is where many of his most iconic anime series were produced: Astro Boy, Kimba the Wild Lion, Goku no Budokan, and Princess Knight. These productions were all broadcasted in both the United States and Japan, because now America understood the market value of anime thanks to the success of The Tale of the White Serpent. Things were going well for anime, but anime fans were about to get blessed, because in 1969,
nice,
a series will be released that is so ahead of its time, it is still going to this day. That's right, even 5 decades later. The legendary Saze-san. If you thought One Piece had a lot of episodes, Saze-san has over 2,600 episodes at the time this video is being made, and it's still ongoing. Sadly though, Mushi Productions went bankrupt in the 1970s. That's okay though, because a few former employees went on to create their own studios. And by that, I mean 2 revolutionary studios. Madhouse, who would go on to produce animes like Hunter x Hunter, Monster, and Death Note, and Sunrise, who produced the entire Gundam franchise, Cowboy Bebop, and Inuyasha. The 1970s would be a great time for anime. The types and quality of anime series were starting to evolve incredibly fast. We got everything from shows like Lupin the Third to Doraemon. But during this time period, there was also a man named Hayao Miyazaki. He floated between studios, helping out where he could. He helped both Toei Animation and Nippon Animation. He produced works like Future Boy Conan and several of the Lupin the Third movies. But this same man would help usher anime into its first golden age, as this was the same Hayao Miyazaki who became the genius behind all the Ghibli films. Him and Isao Takahata would found Studio Ghibli in 1985. This studio has produced several of the highest grossing and awarded films in the history of animation. Some of his biggest hits included Kiki's Delivery Service, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, and so many more iconic films. He has won Oscars and grossed over $1 billion globally. He has lived an incredibly interesting life, and some of the things I learned from this video made me respect him so much. He is an avid pacifist and anti-war. I kinda wanna make a whole documentary about him and Studio Ghibli, so let me know if that's something you would like. Simultaneously to the rise of Ghibli, Sunrise Studio was giving rise to the mecha genre. They was releasing consistent hits under the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise, creating an entire subculture of anime fans. Now between the 1980s and 1990s is where many of the most paradigm shifting anime would be released. Many anime that came out during this time period are still in people's top 10s. The most famous anime that came out during this time period was definitely Dragon Ball. It basically created the blueprint for shonen anime. And before we get to the best part of this video, if you would like to help me chase my own dreams of becoming the king of anime YouTube, just like this video. The like goal for this video will be 201 likes. The 1980s gave us several more elite anime, and one that deserves more notoriety is Legend of the Galactic Heroes. It has one of the best stories in fiction and helped prove that a politically driven drama-filled anime could be just as good and loved as a fan servicey shonen. However, the same year an anime movie would be released that would be even more influential and change the course of anime history. Ultimo Kessi Heroes Akira.
Leave me alone!
To this day, it is considered one of the best and most influential animes of all time, leading it to be the center of several of the controversies coming up next. It was pivotal at proving anime could be enjoyed by people of all ages. These back-to-back bangers would help cultivate the otaku culture that was forming around this time. Anime had gotten so massive that now there were entire groups of people that were strictly anime fans, who didn't consume any other forms of entertainment. I know a few of us can relate. This laid the foundation for what many would consider the best and true golden age of anime, the 1990s. The 1990s anime scene gave us a plethora plethora of iconic and influential anime. Even today, shows like Jujutsu Kaisen were inspired by anime of this time period. We learned about this and others in our The Tragic Rise of Hunter x Hunter video. Some of the best anime from this time period included Cowboy Bebop, Yu Yu Hakusho, Trigun, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Hunter x Hunter, Ghost in a Shell, Rurouni Kenshin, and even technically One Piece, as it was released in 1999. These are just a few of the more notable ones. I didn't include Pokemon in my list, as though it was released in the 1990s, it became so big it's practically an entire genre of its own. As of today, Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise in the world. By this point, anime was so popular in the West that Japanese studios were starting to create anime with the United States audience in mind. Shows like Cowboy Bebop and Dragon Ball were becoming household names in America. By the early 2000s, there was an anime for every single genre or feeling you was looking for. Anime had transcended any box the world was trying to put it in. These genre-bending anime included shows like Death Note, Fullmetal Alchemist, Gintama, Monster, Clannad, Code Geass, Samurai Champloo, Fruit Baskets, Inuyasha, Ouran High School Host Club, Totoro, Welcome to NHK, Fate Stay Night, and Fully Cooley. Out of the 1990s and 2000s, which one do you think had the better shows? All these 2000s anime hold a place in many anime fans' hearts, but it would be three specific and legendary anime that would go on to be so successful that it not only carried Shonen Jump, but anime in general for decades. We have now reached the era of the big three: One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach. Three anime and manga that completely dominated the early 2000s. All three of these anime broke every single manga and anime record possible. They only competed with each other when it came to popularity and longevity. They are instrumental in creating the international lanes that would go on to make anime mainstream. Other hits came and went, but even today, they are responsible for some of the most heated anime debates on and off the internet. And I would like to personally thank Toonami, which helped introduce many people to these three and other great anime before streaming. The rise of streaming is what helped introduce anime to the mainstream audience. Access became way easier, fueling the binge culture around anime. You no longer had to catch up using shady websites or watch anime broken up into 98 parts on YouTube. Yes, that was a thing, and there was always at least one part missing. This bingeability of anime made it an instant cash grab for competing streaming companies like Netflix, Hulu, and Crunchyroll. They started all-out bidding wars trying to gain the rights to any anime they could in hopes of making it an exclusive. Some, like Netflix, even started their own anime production studios after seeing how successful some of their anime originals got. Streaming also helped some underrated anime get a second chance. This is why you see a resurgence of shows like JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. All this notoriety has brought so much money to the anime industry that the animations have gotten mind-blowingly incredible. Shows like Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen are examples of how jaw-dropping visuals can be when anime studios believe in the project, as shows like this typically cost over $100,000 per episode. If you take anything from this video, it's keep watching and supporting anime. Give anime a chance if you've never seen it, or get back into it if it's been a while. It has some of the best stories of all time.